The Tower of London stood silent and cold that February morning in 1554. Its stone walls, steeped in centuries of blood and betrayal, loomed over a young girl whose life had unravelled in just 9 days. Lady Jane Grey, the 9-day queen, was about to meet her fate, a victim of power, ambition and betrayal. She was only 16 years old. Jane never wanted to be queen. She was a quiet girl, more interested in her books and prayers than thrones and crowns. But ambition flowed like poison through her family's veins. Her father, Henry Grey, Duke of Suffolk, and her scheming mother saw an opportunity to push their daughter onto the throne after King Edward VI, her young cousin, died. Edward, dying of illness, was desperate to keep the Catholic Mary Tudor, his half-sister, from ruling. Jane, a Protestant like Edward, became the perfect puppet. Against her will, Jane was crowned Queen of England on July 10, 1553. She wore a heavy jewelled gown, a symbol of power that felt more like a shackle. But she didn't reign for long. 9 days later, Mary Tudor gathered her forces and stormed London. Jane was betrayed by her own council. The throne was ripped away, and Mary, Edward's half-sister, was there to take it happily. Jane and her husband, Guildford Dudley, were imprisoned in the Tower of London. At first, it seemed Mary might show mercy. Jane was young, innocent in many ways. She had never asked for power. But then Jane's father made a fatal mistake. In a desperate attempt to regain influence, he joined a rebellion against Mary. His actions sealed his daughter's fate. Mercy turned to execution. Jane spent her last days in a damp, cold cell. She wrote letters, prayed, and clung to her faith. Her food was simple: bread, broth, and the occasional piece of fruit. She barely ate, consumed instead by fear and sorrow. She knew her time was running out. On the morning of February 12, 1554, Jane was led to the scaffold. She wore a plain black gown, a stark contrast to the royal robes she had once been forced to wear. Her face was pale but calm. Those who saw her said she walked with grace, like a girl beyond her years. Her husband, Guildford, had been executed earlier that morning. Jane had heard the distant sound of his death, the fall of the axe. Now it was her turn. The crowd was quiet as Jane ascended the scaffold. The young girl looked out at the faces below. Some were curious, others sympathetic. A few whispered prayers for her soul. Jane's final words were a prayer for forgiveness, spoken in a steady voice. She held on to her faith until the end. Blindfolded, she fumbled her way to the block, her hands trembling as she placed them upon the rough wood. "Lord, into thy hands I commend my spirit," she whispered. And then the axe fell. Even now, some say Jane's spirit lingers in the Tower of London. On cold, moonlit nights, her ghost is said to walk the battlements, a pale figure in black, her head bowed as if carrying the weight of a crown she never wanted. Lady Jane Grey's story is a chilling reminder of how ambition and betrayal can destroy even the most innocent. She was just a pawn in a deadly game, a girl who wanted nothing more than to be left alone, but whose life was cut short by the greed of others. Her tale is one of sorrow, faith, and the dark, unforgiving shadows of history.